then they're okay. Rather than just being open to urging people to accept the gospel and get baptized, and sure, come along. But instead there appears to me to be a tendency to be very slow with people and to socialise them onto a level where we're okay with them and they're okay with us. And by that time, a lot of people are gone. They're out of here. The urgency is not there. So there is, well, I don't know, if you want to call it lowering the bar, I don't know, but there is an element of okay, we need anyone who's going to say yes to working in the vineyard, to accepting the invitation. It is that sense. Now, that again has been a theme of our work with Kelly's. That again, over the years, we have seen people, increasingly desperate people, responding to the gospel. If you'd like to look over to Matthew 22, there is the parable of the great wedding. He said to the servants, verse 8, "The wedding is ready, but they which were bidden were not worthy. Go therefore into the highways, and as many as you shall find, bid to the marriage." It's obviously talking about how Israel had shown themselves unworthy. They had been invited, they had given their agreement to come, but then when they were actually called, right, it's on now, please come, they, verse 5, they made light of it, and they made silly excuses. Everything was ready, and there's this great tragedy that they did not accept it. And when we read in Matthew 22, verse 4, "I've prepared my dinner, my oxen, my fatlings are killed," the word used there is sacrificed, as if he's saying all the types of the law of Moses, the oxen and the fatlings, etc., these have all come to their moment in the death of Jesus, the sacrifice of Jesus. It was all ready, but they didn't want it. Go out therefore. And that's exactly the language Jesus uses in the Great Commission. Go ye therefore into all the world and preach the gospel to all nations. So here in verse 9, he says to the servants, go you therefore, with the invitation. This is the Great Commission. Go into all the world, therefore, and now here, go ye therefore into the highways. And you bring in, he says, whoever you may find. And yet Jesus is the one who finds, who searches and finds. He is the one who finds the lost sheep, the lost son. God and Jesus, in that sense, are in search of man. There is this wonderful passage in Jeremiah where God says to Jeremiah, run around the city, run around the squares and the streets of the city and see if there's anyone who's searching for me, because I'm searching for them. And so what Jeremiah did was reflecting how God is in search of man. So don't think, please, that God is kind of facing off against man over an open Bible. Indifferent, saying, look here, I've done, as you know, everything for you, gave you my word in the Bible, gave you my son, it's now over to you. You make your response. When my son comes on the day of judgment, we will open the books and we'll see what you made of it. Now, for the moment, you just go and solve the riddle of the Bible. Once you've solved the riddle, then, you'll be on the right track, but I'll talk to you later. I mean, I know that's a caricature, but that is not God. God is in search of man, and God is passionately trying to find people. So beyond the apparent silence of the skies, the steely silence of the skies, beyond that, there is the God who is passionately searching for people. And yet we may say, oh, but I'm searching for the truth. Sure, God is in search of man, and we are in search of God. And when the two meet, there is this flash. No wonder Jesus says that all the angels of heaven rejoice when one sinner repents. When the two sides, as it were, meet each other. So then they went out, verse 10 of Matthew 22, the servants went out into the highways. Same word, Mark 16:20. After he gives them the Great Commission, they went out and preached everywhere. They went out, verse 10, and gathered together as many as they found, just as Jesus says the net is thrown into the sea and gathers together fish of every kind. They that were bidden were not worthy. And I suggest that the Greek word translated worthy really means they were not enough. There were not enough of them. It's got the idea of a numeric aspect. But as a result of their preaching, the wedding was furnished with guests, and that furnished, it was filled numerically. It's as if once there is a specific number converted, then that's it. Then the Lord comes. And Paul says this in Romans 11:25, the full number of the Gentiles must come in. And it's the same word used here about how those that were invited would not come in. But the full number of the Gentiles must come in. So I do suggest that God is working to a number, that one day there will be the last baptism. And that number will be made up. And I suggest that that is why the actual, if you like, calendar date of the coming of Christ is not fixed, because it depends upon us. When the gospel of the kingdom has gone into all the world, then shall the end come, Jesus said. And that's why in Acts 1, when Jesus is ascending to heaven, and the disciples want to know when's he coming back, they're not given a date. They're told the gospel, go back to Jerusalem, and the gospel must be spread worldwide from Jerusalem. When's he coming back? Answer, go and preach the gospel. You see? The idea is that the actual date, the actual moment, I suggest, depends on a number of things, but one of them is on our spreading of the gospel. So then, the servant comes back. The master tells him to go out quickly. Go out quickly and bring in these people. There's an urgency about it. They were to go out, and as I've said, this is not a case of passively waiting for people to come to us. It's not, you stand there and they come to you. The idea is very much you go out. And quickly. There is in both these parables an urgency to the situation. And bring in, he says, the poor and the maimed and the blind and the lame. Now, those four categories are exactly the categories that were excluded from the temple. They were not allowed into the sanctuary. And so I think Jesus is saying, barriers are breaking down. Bring in those people who you have previously thought were not acceptable. Bring them in. Go into the highways and hedges. Well, hedges there, that's the same word that's used about the middle wall of partition. Wall of partition. It's the same Greek word translated hedge. So I think he's saying, get in the people who are right on the borders. And he says, compel them to come in. In the other parable in Luke 14, verse 18, it's sort of a parallel. The man who bought some land said, I can't come in because I must needs go and see my land. I'm compelled to. Same word. Whereas here, Jesus is saying, you compel them because they've got all the things in their secular life that compel them another way. But you compel them the right way. So then we are to compel people. Now that is far different to lamely sort of saying, well, we're here, we're making a witness, and you're welcome to come in, but that's as far as it goes. And I ask each of us, myself included, when was the last time when you really tried to persuade someone of the gospel? When you tried to compel someone? Now, of course, people say, oh, you shouldn't put too much pressure on people, Well, we're talking about eternal life here. If you see someone about to kill themselves or miss out on eternal life, you can't say, oh yeah, well, mustn't pressure them. Of course you must. You try to compel them by all means. So then, who are these poor and blind and maimed? The people who we thought were not acceptable. Well, I said yesterday, we started off in Riga wanting, with a nice ecclesia, 20, 30 people, middle class sort of people, wanting to get more people, maybe of our own type in. And we did a big campaign, and the one woman who got baptised from that was a street woman who started to bring in all sorts of, people from that sort of background. And this opened our eyes to a lot of things. It opened our eyes to people with HIV. It opened our eyes yet more to the suffering of the Russian community in Latvia. They get, because they're Russians and they're 50% of the population in Latvia, they get virtually no social support, no health care, not for free, they've got to pay for it. They get no pension, even though they were born in the country, they worked there all their life. And not everyone who's got HIV has been gay or immoral. There's plenty of other ways, or drug users or whatever. And he's a young man who was in that position, and in fact a married couple, and his first wife is now dead, and we were able to baptise them. And it's obviously no fun having HIV when you've got no access to drugs, you've got no access to medical care, and you're living on the street. This is the AIDS Centre, HIV Centre. You can see the state of his feet. And taking the gospel to people like that. Now that's the blind, lame, maimed, etc., in physical and spiritual terms. And I really get this impression that God is scraping the barrel. Now I'm going to show you something which I believe will shock some of you. And I believe some of you might say, Duncan, whatever, you're a fair enough guy, but no. Now, end. I don't care if you say that. And I wouldn't blame you, because I would have said the same about myself a number of years ago. So be prepared to be shocked. And if you don't like this, and if you say, Duncan, that's too far, okay, you're entitled to your opinion. And I would have been with you. 10 years ago, I'd have been with you. But I'm not now. Because I feel that these parables do imply this, that the gospel must go to the absolute dregs. And not to just the dregs, but to the weirdest situations. Now, that's my wife, that's not the lady I'm going to talk about. Well, there we are doing our work, and there's a series of emails come in from a woman who initially said, oh, I read your material online in Kikuyu or some Kenyan language. And said, oh, it's really interesting, I found the material in my native language, I'm a Kenyan, but said, I speak English perfectly, that's how I came to you, she said. And I realised you teach very different doctrine. Well, we started having this very long conversation, emailing. And I noticed she would email me always at the same time in the afternoon. And this went on for a long time. I kept saying, where are you? You said you're from Kenya. Are you still in Kenya? And she wouldn't answer. And then she started to say, I'm in a position that you wouldn't believe. And I said, oh yeah, we've heard it all. Yeah, no, nothing would shock us. Anyway, she said, well, no, you wouldn't be able to understand my situation. Anyway, well, we went on through all the doctrine, and really, she was like hyper-Christadelphian by the time we'd finished this correspondence. And I said, well, look, aren't you going to get baptized? And I also said, and by the way, why do you send me emails at precisely the same time every day? Roughly, She wouldn't answer that for a while, and then she said, yeah, I would love to be baptized, but there's no way I could be baptized. And I said, look, you must be in prison, right? Maybe you got access to the internet in prison? He said, no, I'm not in prison, not in a literal prison. Well, it was like a sort of a movie, like sort of trying to guess where on earth could this woman be? And who exactly is she? She wouldn't quite give me her name. And I said, can you give me a phone number? No, I don't have a phone. Alright. And I was sure she was in jail. You don't have a phone, and you're emailing me exactly the same time each day. Well, I don't know. So anyway, she said that, we kept her going through this, said, look, I really want to be baptised. I said, well, why don't you baptise yourself then? Oh, she said, well, I would, but I would really like someone to baptise me. I don't feel confident to baptise myself. I said, look here, I love you dearly, lady, whoever you are, wherever you are, but you can't tell me where you are, what your situation is. And, well, she said, look, I'm a secular, ordinary Kenyan woman. And I'm an ordinary, secular Kenyan woman. I was married with a number of kids, and my husband died. And she said, we had a drought where we were, and I didn't know how to survive. And she said, I didn't want to be a prostitute, I'm an honourable woman. And I said, I'm sort of a Catholic. And they said, desperately needed nuns in a remote monastery in Spain. And there'll be good pay. And you can send the pay back for your kids. Well, a nun's got to be a virgin, right? And she goes, yeah, I got 5 kids. I said, don't worry about that. That's okay. Just don't put that on the form. And she said, well, I said, okay. And I thought, well, this is a church. So she said, I'm telling you the story, how it all worked out. So she gets out there in this, I was waiting for you to kind of pick it up, I'm not sure if anyone did, to this convent, which is pretty well like a prison. That's run by a couple of men, monks, and you can imagine what's going on there. There's like massive sexual abuse. These women are there, they are all chosen basically because they're vulnerable, and yes, they're paid for being a nun. I never thought nuns got paid, but they obviously do. And they're allowed to send their money back to where they come from. And she said, believe me, I'm not a Roman Catholic. I hate the Catholic Church. And she said, I'm in this awkward situation, and of course we're all sworn to secrecy, we can say nothing. I mean, she won't say this on email, all of this. And she said, thank God, they picked up some really much younger, pretty girls from Uganda. And she's like, thank God, because I'm a bit kind of free from, whatever, turning tricks. And she said, he drinks, this guy, that she had to sort of service. He drinks, and said he gets really stoned by around lunchtime, and he has his long siesta. And she said, that's when I slip in there and I get online on his computer. Well, this is one of those stories that's like, well, when she was trying to explain this by email, I thought, yeah, actually, it's so weird. It's so weird that it has a ring of truth to it. But she kept saying, look here, the important thing is I get baptized. So I said, well, how can we visit you? And she said, well, we could make up some story. And I said, well, I'm coming with my wife, right? Yeah. So anyway, we come up with a story that we were like white Africans who were living in Kenya, and that we knew her relatives, and we had to visit her on their behalf. So this is when you check in, when you go in there. I mean, they don't allow visitors. I was taking all this while we were waiting, Behind here, there is the mother. Behind here, there's the Mother Superior, who is so righteous and holy she can't even see you apart from through a screen. I mean, hypocrisy, it makes you absolutely furious. And these are the visiting times. And there is this woman who had got this Bible basics. She was, as I say, a very secular woman. Like, she was sort of fun, and she wasn't like I thought nuns are supposed to be. Like, she was quite fun sort of person. And she told us to come at this particular time. And we were there, and she said, oh, he's asleep, like always, so we can, do the baptism. And we did the whole thing with the snores of this guy, absolutely audible. She said, he'll be out for 3 hours. And she goes, oh, what do you want to drink? There's all these cocktails and what do you want? There's vodka, there's everything. What do you want? What should we have? And I don't drink alcohol at all. And I said, I don't drink. I'm so disappointed. She goes, oh, go on, have something. Go on. I said, no, Cindy does. So she got Cindy this, that. And she said, well, let me just bring you this beer. That's why I took a picture of it. This is out of the chief monk's bar. This is out of the chief monk's bar. And I kept saying, so disappointed, but I don't drink alcohol. I said, give me a Coke. Oh, have 2, It's all out of the guy's fridge. Well, I mean, at the time I didn't tell anyone about it. We didn't put this on Catholic because I thought, I don't know. And I remember saying to Cindy afterwards, well, what do you reckon of that one? And it was her who coined that phrase and said, well, I think God's scraping the barrel. The funny thing is with her, I mean, the doctrine was 100%. And all that garbage about dressing up and being a nun, I mean, it honestly means nothing to her. Absolutely nothing. She's back in Kenya now. Praise God. So she's out of the situation. This is some years ago. If you think we shouldn't have done that, I agree with you. I almost agree with you. But you feel you're shunted on a freight train by God's providence to the point where you're there with her inside that convent with the beer from the chief monk there on the table in front of you, and you can hear the guy's snores, and oh come on, she's a really fun person, great person. Oh yeah, I've poured the water in the bathtub. Oh, and then she took all that garbage off, and baptized her, and then she puts a garbage. I mean, I hate all that stuff, I'd be the last guy to be a Roman Catholic, and put all the stuff back on. And it's really like uniform. A guy's got to wear uniform for his job. Well, that's kind of the same with her. Well, I'm not justifying it. Maybe I did the wrong thing. What I'm saying is that this is what I mean when I say that the appeal of the gospel is going far and wide. It wasn't a case of, we had to water down the doctrine. No, we had to water down any doctrine for this woman. She loved it. Loved it. Absolutely every bit of it. We didn't water anything, no watering down, no lowering of any bar. But the sense in which, we're getting more and more desperate, or God is getting more and more desperate to bring people in, is that this is a totally non-standard situation. Totally non-standard situation. And we really believe, you say, well, who's killing? I mean, we really believe that one for all and all for one. And if there's one man who really needs the gospel and is ready for baptism, we will try and get there to do it. And we're told to go out quickly. And I think that sense of urgency is so important. Here's Brother John from New Zealand, and he's out here in Kenya baptizing a blind man. being led literally to the waters of baptism. And he died. He died just a couple of months after this baptism. So go out quickly, seize the moment, and go for it. Talking about the gospel going to the absolutely desperate, to the very margins, well, I mean, Andy's going to talk more about Riga, but I mean, the gospel, in its full doctrinal sense, not lowering the bar, not cheap grace, not any of that stuff, went to this bunch of people living in a garage, Russian people, who I was saying don't have any access to anything, in terrible poverty. They got no running water there. They just go to the gas station and fill up with water. I mean, this is freezing cold. I mean, this is that winter was about minus 30 below. That's in centigrade. No, I don't know in Fahrenheit, but that's extremely low. And carrying that water back from the gas station to this place they're living in. I mean, I took them some candles and some food, as you can see. This is the gospel, in my opinion, going to the margins. It really is, and it's fulfilling the parables that we looked at. Going out at the 11th hour to get anyone in, and going out more and more desperately to the people who are the blind, the maimed, the people living in the hedges. These are the people living in the hedges, quite literally. And go out quickly, sense of urgency. I can't help but reflect that it was almost a year ago to the day that I was in South Sudan. I was in Malakal in South Sudan. And there were various construction workers who had been working for a brother from Kenya, who had given these guys teaching about the gospel, and they had all scattered back to their villages. And they came in on the river, on the barges, on the River Nile, to meet me. And we had 3 days together of careful Bible study. And I didn't quite know what to do because it was all through translator, and they spoke their own version of Arabic mixed with their native language, and I mean, I didn't have a clue. I was working through a translator, and I didn't know what to do, but I thought again of those parables about bring them in. And so this Kenyan brother and I, we baptized this group of young men. This is in the River Nile in Malakal about a year ago. Now, since then, if you've been watching the news, you will know that there's been a huge amount of bloodshed in Malakal, in that town, and we believe that all those young men, those young brethren, are now dead. And I mean, the ethnic cleansing was so crazy, as you probably saw on the news. I mean, one side was like grabbing the town, they would kill everybody, they even went into the hospital and shot the patients in their beds. Well, that's how absolutely crazy it was. So go out quickly, because life is not, so solid. Life is fragile in that sense. And you meet those young men, God willing, in the kingdom of God, but go out quickly, because you may not have much time either. We are all living on borrowed time, and there is in any case an urgency to somehow respond to the tragedy of the fact that people are turning down the supper, and the supper's going cold on the table. Now, with that thought, talking about supper going cold on the table, we're supposed to eat at 2 o'clock, and it's 2:15 now. So maybe that's my cue to stop. Now, I don't know, Joe or Chairman, whether who's my chairman? If we've got time for questions or comments, or whether we want to get on with the food or go to the washroom, I'll leave that in your hands.